Hello, and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast that brings together business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts covering a range of topics. I'm Nicholas Barton, founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. We're an award-winning executive recruitment and consulting solutions firm providing permanent search and independent consulting services across strategy, sustainability and M&A, data and analytics, and transformation and change.
Hello, and welcome to the Barton Partnership's Women in Leadership podcast series. I'm Simran, a consultant at the Barton Partnership, leading our independent consulting efforts across our industrials, energy and services practices. I'm delighted to be joined today by Amy Ruddock. Amy is the VP of Europe and Middle East at Carbon Engineering, where her regional accountabilities include strategy, government affairs and business development. Prior to Carbon Engineering, Amy was the VP of Corporate Development and Sustainability at Virgin Atlantic. She also previously spent 10 years at BCG in the consumer practice area, leading projects on topics ranging from strategy to transformation, operations to commercial, working across Europe and the USA. Amy, thank you for joining me today. Could you start by telling us about your career journey and what drove you to get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I started off life as a PhD physicist. I did natural sciences at university. I loved learning. I wanted to continue, so I did the PhD. I learned during the PhD that research wasn't for me. It wasn't the pace that I was after. I think I needed something that was a bit more immediate impact. So I got into consulting. I joined the Boston Consulting Group as a junior consultant. And then almost 10 years later, I was still there. I left as a senior principal and I focused on the aviation sector while I was there. My third ever project was with a low-cost airline. I got the bug and I never looked back. But I realised that as I was heading towards partnership, that it was aviation I loved, and we can get into a bit more detail about why the move. But I ended up moving to Virgin Atlantic, where I was VP of Corporate Development and Sustainability. Absolutely loved the role, working on all the growth areas of the airline. COVID struck, there was no growth. I had the opportunity to do something different. And for me, I had a period of introspection and I realised that I was deeply passionate about aviation, but I wanted to be decarbonising it. I'm also deeply passionate about climate change and solving that. So I started to look into what does it take to decarbonise aviation. After a lot of research, I realised that direct air capture is going to be absolutely key, both for removing residual emissions, but also for synthetic fuels at scale. So, I reached out to direct air capture companies, got talking to Carbon Engineering, and then started my role there back in December 2020. And I'm now VP of Europe and the Middle East.
It's really nice to hear about your journey using, the natural sciences and the experience that you gained at Virgin Atlantic and kind of taking you through to sort of Carbon Engineering. How have you found the kind of move, I suppose, from working in consulting and then going to a large corporate and now working in a startup? I can imagine that they can be quite different environments, I suppose, to kind of work in.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about myself and where I thrive. So what I loved about consulting was working with teams of motivated people. I loved the pace. I loved the fact that I felt I was constantly working on a challenge. But I did miss seeing things through, knowing what it actually takes. And I guess part of my reason for looking for another challenge was I felt that I'm this advisor, but I've never been in the corporate world trying to get stuff actually done. So I need that experience of getting stuff actually done. So I went into a corporate. What I loved about the corporate was I really did get to own things. I really did get to see what it takes to get stuff done. And I had a newfound respect for our clients in consulting. Sometimes as a consultant, it can feel like things are moving a bit slowly, but I realized kind of all the stuff that's happening in the background that you don't get that visibility of as a consultant. I think what was challenging for me at a corporate is there were very defined roles versus consulting. So, my area was to look after X, Y, and Z. And there wasn't that same ability to step up and sort of opine on what's happening in A, B, and C. Whereas a consultant, that's your bread and butter to do it. So I think then moving into carbon engineering is, I'd probably say it's coming out of its startup phase now. We're about 150 people. It's in that kind of small business size, but I feel that it blends the best of all worlds for me. It's got that pace. I can work across different things that isn't perhaps directly in my remit, but I really am seeing things through. So I feel like I've found a bit of a Goldilocks zone for me now.
That's really nice to hear. And I think you kind of touched upon it earlier, but how did you decide it was the right time to leave BCG after kind of spending, almost 10 years there? And, what advice would you give to others in consulting right now about making that move and when they're thinking about making that move?
Yeah, I think BCG gave me top rate training, and the amount that I was able to learn in those 10 years, the getting to the so what, the communicating, it was just second to none. But I think two things did prompt me. The first was I was very close to sort of equity partnership, and that would mean that I would need a platform. I would need to bring in revenue. I was very fixated on the aviation industry that I loved. And it's difficult to serve different clients within the same region because of the competitive dynamics. So it would have to be a very global role. I had just had 2 children. My girls are only 20 months apart, and I felt like that travel was going to be a challenge. And now BCG is really supportive around those kind of things. So the question is, I was in the consumer practice. Did I want to have more of a focus on retail and consumer goods, which could be more local? But I just felt that there was some kind of compromise around that aviation or travel. And then that's probably the sort of environmental prompt for me. And then the internal prompt for me was I derive a lot of my confidence from experience. And I felt like I knew the consulting world, the business model so well. But again, if I was out advising my clients about how to get stuff done, I really felt that I needed to experience how to get stuff done. So I went out to a corporate thinking, maybe this is the world for me. Or if it's not, then I'll bring back that wealth of experience into consulting that I think I need.
And do you have any kind of advice for women, at that crossroads, having children?
Yeah, it can be really difficult to try to assess what you don't know. My main advice is spend some time on introspection. If you're not practiced in doing that, consider a coach who can help you do it formally or informally. The real questions are, what do you value in life? Where do you thrive? Some people have where they want to be in 5 years. Some people prefer to just go with their gut feeling. But if you do have that way, do you want to be in 5 years? Then what are the gaps to get there? Then you'll have I created a list of 5 things that really matter to me. And then I was able to compare my current role against that versus opportunities that were coming up. And I think, as humans, we have an inherent bias towards what we know and away from change. So I think you do need to make it quite logical and quantitative to be able to make that mental switch. And then I'd say when you've decided to make the switch, just prepare for it to feel quite different. I don't know if I mentally prepared myself enough, but for me the biggest thing was pace. I quickly got a reputation of this person who wants to push and push and push and push. That's a very consulting thing to do. You have 3 months to solve a problem, but the reality is now you're working with people that you'll be working with for years, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's really great advice. No, thank you for sharing. And in terms of carbon engineering, where you are now, it's a really interesting proposition, actually. I know we've kind of spoke about it previously, looking at the commercialization of technology that captures CO2 from the air. I think it would be really interesting to share some insight into the business, but also your role and remit there as VP of Europe and the Middle East.
Yeah, so the philosophy of the company, it was founded in 2009, was we want to make a difference to climate change. We want to be climate relevant. And The way that the company does it is direct air capture. We capture CO2 directly from the atmosphere, which can then be sequestered underground, removing carbon, reversing emissions from any time, any place, anywhere. Or you can use that carbon dioxide to create drop-in compatible products. The key for the company was to be climate relevant. You need to be doing this at billion-ton scale. Scientists are telling us you're going to need billions of tons of this, so we want to go big, which led to some of our technology choices, which I won't go into, but people are very welcome to go and look at our website. But on the business model side, as a small company, we're not going to solve climate change. 150 people aren't going to do that. You need to work in partnership. What does carbon engineering bring to the table? We're technology providers. We have expertise in that direct air capture technology. So we work with others as development partners who go out and build those projects and license our technology. We're very much starting out as an industry. So a big part of the challenge is you don't have supportive policy in many places yet. Like, there is no payment for cleaning up the skies. You pay people to remove your rubbish, you pay for water sanitation, but you don't pay to clean the atmosphere, and you can't create a business unless you've got a revenue stream. So there's a chicken and egg problem to solve. You need the policy in place before you're going to build at scale. So my role is across Europe and the Middle East, and it's all about stimulating that demand through the policy side of things and the supply. So finding those plant development partners across the region.
You've kind of spoken, within climate change organisations about the imperative for a positive work-life balance as well for caregivers and diversity of thought within climate change organisations. I mean, would you be able to share some strategies for achieving that balance, especially in a post-pandemic workplace as well?
Yeah, I can tell you what I know and what I think. And I'm no expert. And, this was a passion for me at BCG as well. We looked into what it means to be a consultant and also a caregiver. But I think there's a role of the company and a role of the individual. And on the company side, it's creating the environment where people can thrive, whatever background they come from. And I think the key is flexibility, treating people like adults. No set hours. Obviously, you're going to need overlap time, but don't dictate when people get their work done. Don't dictate where they get it done. I think there's a place for offices. I think you need to foster that human connectivity to make the best relationships. But offices aren't the place to do your focused work. At the moment, my team meets up for summits periodically, and we spend that quality time together. I think it's also openness, about home commitments, any struggles you're having with balancing. And I try as a leader to be very open and just show that's fine, because my husband's a pilot. He's frequently away at weekends, and I have my two little girls all on my own. I don't have time to go and get my hair cut at the weekend, so I will take time out of my working week to do that. With everything in my hair, I will do calls with my team, and that's how I expect everybody to be. I will get the work done, just trust me. And then I think very tangibly around parental leave, I think it needs to consider either parent can be the primary caregiver. In my household, I don't really believe in the terms, but if we're going to use the terms, my husband is more the primary caregiver and I'm more the primary breadwinner, and traditional models for sort of parental support haven't reflected that balance. And then I think there's a role of the individual, and that's to understand and balance your own priorities. I am super guilty of myself sometimes putting work first, but I think it is what you prioritise gets done. So if the company puts in place those things for you, you as an individual need to make sure that you understand your own priorities.
Just giving that kind of ownership on your own deliverables and just making sure if the work gets done, then that's kind of the main focus. I mean, do you think that's what businesses can be doing more to kind of, nurture a more diverse and inclusive workforce?
Yeah, I think so. And the businesses that I've been part of and where I've been able to be a leader, I have tried to drive that. I do think the key to a successful team is a diversity of experience and thoughts. And if that's a culture that permeates the business, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution, but if wanting that diversity of thought is a priority for the leadership, then it gets spoken about and the right things for that business gets done. So for me, the major thing is a culture that supports that, and all the hard things will flow out of that.
My final question would be, what advice would you give to the next generation of women starting out in their careers, whether it be in kind of a more technical industry or otherwise?
I think my number one tip is relish learning opportunities, however they come, wherever they come, every step of the way. If you're seeking to grow as a person and that's what you look for in a career, there's very few wrong steps you can take. And, I give an example. COVID hit soon after I joined an airline. It was not what I expected. The role was not how I'd imagined, not how I desired, but I learned so much. I learned crisis management. I learned how the business worked really quickly. I really learned how to have difficult conversations, rapid decision making, even corporate finance. And I could have chosen at the start to sort of wallow in having taken this perfect opportunity that became imperfect, but instead I see the experiences giving me a platform to move on to what I did next. And then I think the other thing I'd say is just always make time to sit back, reflect, and build a picture of what makes you tick. I think above all, you should be happy. It's very hard to be successful in a career unless you're happy. And happiness is not easy. There will be ups and down days, but you do need to understand what makes you tick in order to keep chasing that.
Some of that really resonates with me, because sometimes you can be very focused on one thing, and I think a lot of the time you need to take that step back and actually reflect on where this is going and your own happiness, I suppose. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak today, and it's been really great having you on here as well.
Thank you for inviting me.